Hello, my name is Viktor Neustroev, I'm a candidate master, and today I'm going to make a review of the 6th game of the match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. So again, the 6th game ended in a draw, but here you may see that the name of this video is How to Checkmate Magnus Carlsen. It's because Fabiano Caruana had a real chance to checkmate, but unfortunately he didn't find it during the game. Well, probably because it was the end game and it was really difficult to keep concentration up to the very end and also to calculate 30 moves. That was a forced line, but I don't know. There was so many options for black to play, and I can't blame Fabiano Caruana that he didn't choose the correct one. He also chose a very solid continuation, but unfortunately it only led to a draw. In the description of this video you can also find the link to my course How to Play Queen in Games Successfully, which I published on Skillshare. The first 20 students can enroll for free. Okay, let's start with the game between Magnus Carlsen, who was played for white pieces, and Fabiano Caruana playing for black. Magnus played e4. e5, knight f3, knight f6, that's a Russian game, or other people, especially in the West, say Petrov's defense. So knight e5, d6, and usually in this position almost all the players play knight f3. Knight takes on e4, then d4 is the main move. This is how most of the players play. However, I suggest to play knight a3. This move was also popular and grandmasters still play it. The idea of this move is that after knight c3, pawn takes on c3 and white wants to castle queen side and then start the attack on the king side. Like this. Actually, there was a game between Carlsen and Caruana played in St. Louis this year. However, it also ended in a draw. Okay, let's go back. In this position, after d6, instead of playing knight f3, Magnus Carlsen played knight d3. That's not a novelty. There are a few games with this move, but knight f3 is considered to be stronger. However, maybe Magnus Carlsen prepared something. Knight takes on e4, queen e2, queen e7. And the idea of knight d3 move was to play knight f4, with the idea to play knight d5 after that. Usually, knight f6 here can be a very natural move. Then, for example, knight c3, knight a6 to protect this pawn, knight f to d5, knight takes knight, knight takes on d5, then queen takes queen, bishop takes on e2, bishop e6, knight f4, and bishop f5. So the position is approximately equal. Maybe it looks slightly better for white, but actually there is no real advantage. I believe both sides have equal chances to win here. And almost all the games in this position between grandmasters can end in a draw. Maybe that is what Magnus Carlsen prepared against Fabiano Caruana, but in this position, after knight f4 was played, Fabiano Caruana applied a novelty. He played knight c6, knight d5, and then knight d4. That was the idea, to trade the queens. So white takes on e7, black takes on e2. However, in this position, queen e5 as a strong threat. Then if knight c7, king d8, and if here white takes on e8, then after knight d4, white loses the game. For example, if queen e3, then knight c2. If queen moves out of their e-file, then it will be a discovery check. And then white loses the game. But actually, white can play knight b5 instead of taking the rook on e8 to cover the d4 square. If a6 now, then white plays d4, knight takes d4, knight takes knight, queen takes on d4. The number of pawns is equal here, but the position is slightly better for white because of the weakness of the king on d8. Okay, so maybe that's why queen e5 wasn't played here. Instead of this move was played in knight d4, which is a more solid continuation. So here knight e7, knight e2. They both decided not to take the bishops on c1 and on c8. So yeah, probably if knight c8, then just knight c1. Both knights are trapped. He played knight d5, attacking on c7, and knight d4. If now knight takes on c7, king d8, knight takes on e8, but the same thing can be played by black, knight c2, knight a1. If, for example, bishop d3, the idea looks natural because the bishop here protects the pawn, and at the same time attacks the knight on e4. But then knight c5. Knight takes on c7, king d8. Knight takes on e8. However, knight takes on d3, pawn takes, knight c2, king d1, knight a1. In this position, white is one pawn up. Both knights are trapped. And d2 and d3 pawn actually stop white pieces from developing. That's why the position is considered to be equal. Okay, let's go back. So after knight d4, here white played knight a3. That's a novelty. Just to protect the pawn on c2. After that, knight a6 to protect on c7. f3, knight 4 c5, d4, knight d7. Here black looks passive, but the position is equal. So here, if black plays d5, it will be almost symmetrical, but after knight takes on e6, pawn has to take, and then the pawn on e6 will be weak. That's why first knight b6, to take on e6 with the bishop. Bishop d3, d5. Well, the pawn structure is almost symmetrical. Knight c2, bishop d6, just developing the pieces. Knight takes knight, bishop takes on e6. King f2, though there is no real advantage for white. Maybe he is just slightly better, but that's not enough to get any practical chances to win. h5. By the way, do you understand the idea of h5 move? That's a kind of prophylactics. The bishop on e6 can be restricted with g4. That's why it's quite important to play h5 to stop g4 move. h4. Knight c8. Knight goes to e7 to a better position. g3 to leave the square on g2 for the knight. And then here black decided to play c5. So Fabiano Caruana is not afraid to play with an isolated pawn in this position, because if d takes on c5, then bishop takes on c5, and black pieces are more active, and then they can interact with each other successfully. Bishop c2, castle. rook d1, rook f d8, just activating the pieces, c takes on d4, and pawn takes on d4, rook a c8. Here I believe black is slightly better, however it's not enough to win. If now white doesn't make any mistakes, then it will be a draw anyway. Bishop b3. I think bishop b3 is a kind of a mistake, because white underestimated this maneuver, knight c6, knight a5. So knight c6, bishop f4, knight a5. Rook goes to c1. Black decided not to take immediately. However, this move also made sense. So first he played bishop b4 with the idea to take on b3 and then to play a5 and stop the b pawns of white. So it's like a way to fix the weaknesses. Now bishop goes to d1, knight c4, b3 and knight a3. Now black is threatening to play bishop c3 and trap the rook. So this is how black can win the exchange. That's why first rook takes on c8, rook c8, and rook c1 trading the other rook. Knight b5 attacking the pawn on d4. Rook takes rook, bishop takes on c8, knight a3. So the idea here is to trade the d4 pawn to d5 pawn, and it actually simplifies the position with more drawish tendencies. Knight c3 was played. It's kind of a fork, attacking on d1 and a2, and at the same time protecting his own pawn on d5. Bishop c2. But here black decided not to take on a2, because then he loses the pawn on d5. What do you think? What is the best plan for black? How to play here? Here, black can capture on a2, but not immediately. First, black should fix this weakness. If, for example, bishop e6 is played to protect on d5 and to take on a2 after that, then just a4. So that's why bishop a3 and then bishop e6, and then black takes the pawn on a2. Bishop b8 was played after that, a6 and f4. And if now bishop e6, then f5 can be played. That's why here Fabiano Caruana plays bishop d7 with the idea to protect the pawn from c6 with this bishop. f5, bishop c6, bishop d1. So I believe in this position to take the pawn on a2 was a really good move. It was also possible to take on d1 and then play bishop b2. However, bishop b2 was played first. This move also makes sense. If a4, for example, then knight d1, knight takes on d1, and bishop d4, that's absolutely winning position for black with an extra pawn and a pair of bishops. Black took the pawn on h5. Knight e4, discovered the attack. Check, and then we take the pawn on d4. And in this position, black has a strong initiative. He wants to advance his d pawn. Bishop f4 protecting the knight. Bishop c5, and bishop f3, knight d2 attacking the bishop on f3. And in this position, maybe knight f1 was a better move. Knight takes on f3. King e2 doesn't work because of bishop b5. King f2, bishop e4. Oh, that's still a losing position because then the light squared bishop comes to b1 and takes the weaknesses on the queen side. Like this. Okay. maybe it still makes sense to go to this position, because if now black takes on d2, he gonna play the endgame with the bishops of opposite color, which has really many drawish tendencies. Even without a pawn or without two pawns, the endgame with bishops of opposite color can be drawish. Okay, let's go back. So bishop d5 was played. That's a kind of a strange decision. But the idea was that in the end of the line, black will have just a few pawns, and it will be not enough to win this position. So you see, he sacrifices the piece. Bishop e3. If now bishop takes on e3, then bishop d5 is a check, and then knight retreats. That's why here bishop takes on c6, knight takes on f4. If now pawn takes on f4, then pawn takes on c6. That's absolutely winning position for black. That's why here bishop b7, then the black bishop has to retreat. Bishop d6, it's a quite important move here. Bishop takes on a6, knight e4, attacking the pawn on g3, g4. And why did we play bishop d6? Because we want to play bishop a3 and still take one of the enemy pawns on the queen side. This is what Fabiano Caruana thought. Bishop c4, king f8, g5, knight c3, b4. So he sacrificed the b pawn and kept the a pawn, because the a pawn will be a distant passed pawn. I mean, it's more distant than b pawn. Bishop takes on b4, king to f3, knight a4, bishop b5, knight c5, a4. How to locate the black pawns on the king side? Of course, g6 will be a mistake, because the pawns will be located on light squares, and it's easy to trade that pawn. For example, f takes on g6, f takes on g6, king g4, and then h5. That's why f6, king to g4, knight e4, with the idea to force white to take on f6, king h5, bishop e1, bishop d3, knight d6. And in this position, white decided to distract the bishop on e1. He played a5. Now bishop takes, the pawn on h4 doesn't need any protection. That's why he plays king to g6 after he trades his g pawn. Bishop d8, king h7, knight f7, bishop c4, knight e5, bishop d5, then bishop a5. So that's a very complicated endgame with almost no practical chances to win here. But if white makes a mistake, it's still possible. h5, bishop d2, bishop a2, knight f3, bishop d5, knight d4, and king g6 here was played. That's a mistake. Bishop c4 was the correct move. So, but it's not obvious that king g6 is a mistake. It is a mistake because of bishop g5 that was played, and now the position is winning for black. But even Fabiano Caruana didn't realize it at that moment. Bishop c4. And in this position in the game it was played knight f3. But the best move, the winning move, was bishop h4. And now I'm going to show you how black could checkmate white king in this position. Of course, not all the moves are forced, but the general idea will work for any lines. So bishop h4, then let's say bishop d5. Knight e2, knight goes to g3 to attack both pawns. Bishop g5 first, king went out of these two pawns, knight e2 back. Now we attack them both and force the bishop to come to g4, and then we can play with our king because there is no bishop on this diagonal. King h8, bishop f4, king h7, bishop d6. So the idea is to get the king to f8. So how to play in this position? If king h8, then bishop f8, king h7, knight e4, with the idea to play knight g5 and bishop g7 checkmate. h6, knight g5, king h8. So now he loses the pawn, and on the next move, white will be checkmated. So bishop g7 is a checkmate. Let's go back. What if here instead of king h8 he plays h6 immediately? Then bishop f8, just the same idea. Oh, here, for example, if bishop d1, then just knight f5. If bishop h3, then knight e4, knight g5, take the pawn, and then bishop goes to g7, like this. So this is how Fabiano Caruana could be checkmated. What else? So it was bishop d5 move in this position, but what if instead of this move he plays h6 immediately? Then white can be still checkmated. Knight f3, king to h5, knight e5, attacking this bishop. So if king takes, then knight takes here, then both pawns die. Bishop a2, bishop g5. If h7, then king g7. Bishop b3, knight f3, king g4, knight d4, attacking the bishop, and at the same time attacking the pawn. Now h7, so no time for black to capture the bishop because of h8. King g7, bishop g8, and after bishop c1, one of the pawns will be lost, and then the other one also dies. Because white is in a Zugzwang. If king moves, then he loses on f5. If bishop moves, then he loses on h7. So after bishop h4 in all the lines, white can be checkmated. But unfortunately, it's quite difficult to calculate for a human. That's why Fabiano Caruana didn't notice this move. He played just knight f3. King h7, knight e5, knight g4, bishop c4, knight e3, bishop d3, knight goes back to g4, knight h6, king g6, king e7. Then black wants to get his king closer to the enemy pawns. Bishop c2, and king come closer. Bishop b3, and in this position king g3 had some practical chances with the idea to play knight h6. But even it's a draw. So knight e3 was played, h6, and here the pawn is going to be promoted. That's why bishop takes on h6, king takes on h6, knight takes on f5, and here they agreed to a draw because it's enough for white to have the bishop to be able to stop the pawn. And the only knight, of course, can't checkmate. Okay, so you saw how Magnus Carlsen could be checkmated, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So the match continues, the score is equal. Now it's 3-3. So please subscribe to my channel and watch the review of the 7th game. Also, don't forget to get my new course, how to play Queen Endgames successfully. You can find the link in the description of this video. Thank you for your attention.